So welcome to our latest in our kind of a webinar series related to the Kickstart scheme, but also related just to general employment. For those that don't know what the Kickstart scheme is or aren't involved, it's a £2 billion investment by the government. Rishi Sunak gets a credit because he's the one that's opened the purse strings for it, but they're prepared to invest in businesses being able to take on new full-time members of staff. People who are 18 to 24 who qualify for the scheme can be fully funded at national minimum wage for 25 hours a week, which enables for over 6 months, which enables businesses to kind of bounce back and grow, enables those young people that are currently unemployed because they've been made redundant due to the pandemic, or they're struggling to get work, or so on and so forth, enables them to get into a good workplace and start their career, prove themselves. Employers get to kind of try before they buy, which is a great scheme. So, you know, lots of you listening are already on the scheme and already using us, but anyone that isn't, wants to take advantage of the scheme, then feel free to just get in touch afterwards and we can just give you some more information. I'll pass you over to Tracy now, who's a HR specialist, and what we wanted Tracy to do is talk about this very challenging area I've just discussed with Tracy kind of before everyone else came into the room, how challenging it is taking on new people, especially young people. There's some people are concerned around, there might be more challenges with young people with this sort of stuff. So I'll pass you over to the expert, Tracy, who can introduce herself, tell you her credentials, and then get into the subject of inducting.
Hello everybody, I will just share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll go through with you. Can everybody see that? Maybe just give us a thumbs up or shout yeah. Fabulous. Okay, so really lovely to see everybody today. Just a bit of an intro to me. So I run Mint HR, and what we do is provide support to small, medium businesses in the Yorkshire, Lancashire region, helping them deal with the challenges that come with managing employees. And there's lots of challenges, lots that we've come across in the last 12 months. We work with lots of clients to assist them with welcoming new employees, with the aim of retaining great people and ensuring that they settle in quickly, which is absolutely a benefit for the company and the individual. So what I'm going to do is impart some of my knowledge on that, give you some top tips to take away. More than happy to share with you any of the details afterwards if you would find it useful. And just honestly try and make it as interactive as possible. You can sit here and be bored to tears and listen to me for the next kind of like 40 minutes. But if you've got questions, Mark will be monitoring those. Please just shout up and I'll do my best to answer as much as I possibly can. So today we're going to look at onboarding and inducting, but there's going to be some elements focusing on young people as well, because obviously this is the premise of the Kickstarter scheme. So we'll cover off those as well.
You're going back into your office, aren't you? Huh?
Is somebody asking me a question?
I'm going to make my lunch whilst I'm listening to it.
Okay, so in relation to induction or onboarding, so there are significant differences between the two, and I think people get a bit confused about what is the difference. So my answer to that is that actually both have their place. So induction generally refers to the process of filling out forms, getting an overview of benefits, whereas onboarding is a longer term process that focuses on helping new employees becoming a part of the organisation, building crucial relationships, understanding their role and learning how they can add value. And onboarding starts before the new employee has started working, from the moment you've got that interaction with them and you're offering them the job. And it allows you to make best use of their key time between making that offer and them arriving on that first day. So there's lots you can get into that part before they even walk through the door. It imparts the knowledge necessary, and so that they can step into the workplace with confidence. The induction is designed to help new arrivals learn the ropes. So it's much more of the basic kind of stuff. It's practical, hands-on, and make sure that the employee can navigate through the first few weeks. Onboarding is longer term, and it starts early because it facilitates the employee's understanding of the organisation, about interpersonal processes that just cannot be sped up without sacrificing that quality. Socialisation and trust building can't be sped up. It's something that takes time. Onboarding connects understanding with performance. High performance is difficult without context and a thorough understanding of the organisation. Again, it's something that just can't be gained quickly. And onboarding combines information with both, with discussion and development. So many employers I see just focus on the induction, on the real basic stuff, and feel that that is going to fix all, when it just isn't the case. So why onboard then? There's various stats that have been pulled together from various different sources. So 69% of employees are more likely to stay with their places of employment for at least 3 years after they have had a great onboarding experience. Almost 8 in 10 of new employees agreed that they would have settled in much quicker had there been a better onboarding process. There's a couple of dates here about the amount of time that is crucial. So the Winhurst group said that 22% of employee turnover happens within those first 45 days. And again, if that's happening, we need to be looking at the onboarding experience. First 90 days is more crucial than we think. So again, onboarding is about not taking our eye off the ball too early and keeping going with that process. And without a good onboarding process, employees have said it can take 3 to 4 months before they feel confident and competent in their work. And just imagine how damaging to productivity that 3 or 4 months can be, and how it can be flipped with a really good onboarding process to actually getting somebody quickly settled in and really churning out the work. So that was kind of like all of the statistical side of it, but what about the more emotional stuff? So the top picture there is, just imagine you rock up on your first day and you don't know where to go. No one's expecting you. You don't know if you're wearing the right clothes, if you're underdressed or overdressed. Should you have parked where you have? Am I parked in the MD spot and I really shouldn't be there? Should you have brought some food? You know, what options are there going to be for you to eat during the day? It's a basic human need. So your heart is racing, and you don't know even the person that you're meeting what they look like. Now just imagine that that is happening to somebody who is coming to potentially their first ever job. So what you've got to think about that is the impression that it's leaving to that individual. You know, how are they feeling, and how long is it going to take them to get over that? You know, how long are we going to be leaving them floundering and with these anxieties?
Tracy, another thing to maybe consider there as well is, you know, some of these people have, to qualify for the scheme, they've had to been out of work for 3 months.
Yeah.
So, you know, their confidence could have been severely hit. You know, some of them might have left university in June last year and been applying for jobs for 6-9 months or whatever. So, you know, psychologically they could be in a, you know, quite a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
Well. So it's, you know, so the as you've said, the emotional stuff is really important to consider. Just, you know, throwing them in at the deep end and expecting them to swim is extremely challenging for the best of people, let alone someone that's had some challenges like this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. It's you know, it's daunting enough for anybody going into a new job, but you've got to think about the history behind them coming into that employment and what kind of like baggage they're coming with. Yeah. So the bottom picture there for me is about flipping that. It's about taking walk in their shoes. You know, you want to be in a situation where you've done everything within your power to make them feel welcome. So imagine what would make you feel welcome? What anxieties did you face when you joined a new place of work? Speak to others in the business, find out how their onboarding experience was. Mark mentioned a really good point just when we were chatting before you joined about if somebody leaves your organisation, say to them, what would have made things better? What can we do for this next person coming in to make that a much smoother process? So what if we don't onboard then? What are the repercussions of that and them getting off to a bad start? Well, there's going to be poor integration into the team because they're just going to feel that they're not integral and really don't know where they sit. That's going to lead to low morale. But I think not just for the new employee, but for others within the business who can see that somebody new is not being supported fully. We've mentioned before about less productivity because they're just not going to be as up to speed as quickly as you would like. The worst case scenario is that they're just going to say, no, this is not for me, and are going to resign and move along. And again, that brings up a whole host of other issues, going back to the recruitment starting point, you know, and with the Kickstarter scheme, it's something that you really want to embrace. And if you kind of like have somebody that leaves, it's just not going to work out well. Which links to the bad reputation. Again, all of the above are going to mean that people will start talking, well, I joined that company and it wasn't the best experience. Employees will be talking amongst themselves, which overall leads to a bad reputation. I've put grievance in there, and grievance is a very formal process. So it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who is unhappy with their onboarding process will raise a grievance. In fact, I'd probably suggest that they wouldn't because they'd be too new and just wouldn't want to cause any waves. But it's the unheard grievances that are underlying that, the grumblings that they're not raising, that are even more important, because you will either end up, like I said, with somebody leaving or staying but being extremely unsettled. And having a poor onboarding experience can manifest itself in poor presenteeism, in attendance. They could be taking time off sick, they could be turning up late. And I do think there is a tendency when somebody is in the onboarding or the probationary period that we will look very negatively at those elements as opposed to trying to get under the skin of what is causing that, and if there's something that we could have done better or something that we can turn around.
Tracy?
Yeah.
This is even more relevant as well with this scheme because their work coaches at the job centre will probably be keeping in touch with them and kind of saying, look, you know, how's your first whatever gone? How's it going? You know, is there anything we can help with or any challenges or those sorts of things? And obviously we're communicating with them as well. So that kind of, you know, making them feel as comfortable as possible, as early as possible, I think is even more important. It's obviously really important all the time, but even more important with these young people, as we said, because they'll be going back to the work coaches at the job centre and communicating how it's going.
And I imagine if they're not getting good feedback from the individual, that the chances of that employer getting another individual on the Kickstarter scheme could be reduced.
Yeah, so all those sort of things. Yeah, the you know, most of the people that are on it, by the very fact they're on this call, it suggests that they're kind of, we're preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
Anyway, and most of the people that I think, well, nearly all the people that I've accepted to use me as a gateway, that's one of the things that we're trying to filter out and make sure they are a good employer, and why we're putting all this in place. But there will be people who use this scheme and abuse it and might get into trouble as a result of it, because you know, it might flag up something that they're breaching in terms of employment law or so on and so forth, because you know, a government organisation starts to dig into it a bit more because they've found out a young person's been treated badly or whatever. I'm not saying that, you know, people on this call, it's not really going to impact them, but you know, these are all the things that people need to think about. There's, like you said, repercussions of not treating people nicely or so on and so forth.
Yeah, totally. So I've pulled together a bit of a plan as to what should be covered on an induction. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide in too much detail because I'm actually going to hone in on main elements of it in further slides. But again, if anybody does want a copy of this, so they've just got a starting point to map out their induction and onboarding process, then please just shout up. But it does show there that you know, it's important before their first day, right through to their the first year, to actually help somebody through the induction and onboarding process. So just in relation to pre-employment then, I just thought it would be useful to include some basics for this. So at the top of there is that their right to work checks and references. So references, a lot of people say they're not worth the paper that they're written on. You know, sometimes references can be useful. It's I mean, I would imagine through the Kickstarter scheme that they're going to be getting some support and encouraged to move into your workplace. So I think that kind of basis might be covered. But certainly the right to work checks are extremely crucial. When I would suggest even at the interviewing stage, you are checking those out, because there are real penalties for employers if they fail to have the right documents in check, and that's a civil penalty of up to £20,000 and the potential for jail if an employer is found guilty of employing someone who they knew had a reasonable cause that they did not have the right to work in the UK. So it's just something to be aware of. So I've got on there a call from the manager, the senior manager. Again, the more kind of like input they can have and the viewing of those senior faces within the business, the more kind of like they'll be bought in and less daunting they will find the process. Company information. I would suggest a lot of people within their induction process will, on the first couple of days, sit somebody down in front of a desk with the company handbook, with reams and reams of paper to just wade through. You know, utilize that time before they even join to send some information. And some, certainly, you know, people who maybe don't have the time might not be able to do that, but you will equally have some people that really just want to get immersed in everything and utilize that before they join. Make sure their first day is clearly mapped out. Send them a welcome email, have a welcome chat with them, make sure they know exactly what they need to be doing before they start, where they need to go, where they need to park, everything like that. I've put social media on there because, again, when we're talking about young people especially, they are living in the age of social media. You know, if we can send them links to our website, to our LinkedIn profile, to anything that can help them feel, again, integrated and brought up to speed as much about the company as possible. And I've just put there about introduction to colleagues. Again, it might be useful to say to them, invite them in before they even join, to just say, why don't you come and meet, you know, so-and-so who you'll be working with, come and have, you know, a cuppa with us. And, you know, so you're not as daunted when you're walking through the door on that first day.
Tracy, with that, quite a few people, obviously with the pandemic and with changes to working patterns and this new world we're going to be working in, quite a few people are working remotely a fair bit of the time, or some people will be completely remote if they're doing a job that they can do that. How would that vary then? What kind of advice would you give to those people that aren't having them in an office sitting next to them?
For me, it's just tap into as much virtual resource as you can. You know, what we're doing here today is the next best thing. You know, invite them to a virtual call. You know, if you've got any team events that are going on virtually, then invite them to that. Just utilize your best virtual resources, or like I said, send as many links and as information as you can, just so you can involve them as best as you can.
Yeah, we've done an entire webinar managing workers remotely, which was really, really good by again, an expert on that sort of sort of stuff. But yeah, just if that impacts the induction and onboarding process at all, then quite a few people are having to do that, at least in the short term,
Yeah.
if not the long term, because you know the modern world of work that we have to deal with.
There is so many new employees that have joined employment in a virtual world, and whilst I think there is, you know, some people saying that they can't wait to get back, I think there's always going to be a place for virtual, and I think with your induction and onboarding process, tap into it as much as you can. It doesn't, you know, people may say, well, I can't get time off work. You know, what about in your lunch break? You could just tap into a Zoom call and we'll do some introductions for you. It opens up so many more possibilities that weren't there before.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Tracy.
So just moving on now to who should be involved in the induction process. So I've put there the line manager. It seems pretty obvious, but you know, the examples I've seen where the line manager's just said, I don't have the time, you know, for me, if you're going to really focus on this, then you need to make the time. And the line manager is absolutely crucial to this. You know, they're the person that's going to be setting objectives, setting, you know, dealing with feedback and performance management. So, you know, the line manager for me is absolutely crucial. HR there is crucial as well. And in different businesses, certainly small businesses, that can be made up of, you know, an office manager might be doing the HR process. There may be an outsourced HR consultancy like Mint. And again, they can be tapped into for the induction and onboarding process. I'd actually say it's more induction, you know, it's getting the basics right. But I think opening up the possibility to people that HR is there as a supportive measure is really useful from as early on as possible. Health and safety, absolutely crucial, certainly for our younger people who may not be as aware of certain elements of health and safety. So having a representative or the person that's dealing with that, spending some time with the individual is, again, absolutely crucial. Colleagues who they interact with, just again, having those introductions and getting them to spend time. So that can be shadowing other people, it can be taking up some bits of work for them just so they can get involved in that area. Again, getting those people involved would be really useful. I've put senior management there. People quite often, if it's even in a small company, may have senior management on a bit of a pedestal, thinking, oh, it's a bit daunting to speak to them, you know, but again, having that face-to-face or virtual response to those individuals will really help. And I put buddy or mentor on there as well, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail later on. But certainly having that person will help speed up that settling in process. So how long should it last? Again, we've touched on this, but for me, it's right at the interview stage, the introductions before they even start. The first day, we'll look at that in a bit more detail, but having lots of hand-holding on that day. And even in the first week, lots of structure to be provided. Within that first month, I'd see lots of discussion about how the person's going to develop and having objectives set, but that's reviewed, I would say, on a monthly basis, and certainly during a probationary period. Now, most businesses will have a 3 or a 6 month probationary period. Again, this gives you and the employee a real opportunity to use that process as, you know, thrashing out any areas of development that they need and providing them with feedback. So, you know, I would say certainly for 6 months and potentially up to a year, depending on how that person's settling into the role.
Tracy, just on that probation stuff.
Yeah.
Typically, I think with the way the Kickstart scheme works, they have a fixed term contract to start with of 6 months. So effectively they are employed. Then if someone takes them on as a full-time employee, how does that probation period work? Does it carry over or does it start again? Or
no, even with a fixed term contract, I would recommend that a probationary period is still in there, and it's because they may become permanent afterwards. So, or it may be that even in the fixed term, if performance isn't quite right, the probationary period and the review times really allows you to say to somebody, look, I need you to work on these areas. So I think the two can work hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you get into the end of the fixed term, at the end of the 6 months and the probation, then I would suggest that you write to them to say, now we're taking you on permanently, you've passed out of probation and you're now on a permanent contract. So that's all finalised and they know exactly where they are.
And would that permanent contract have an element of probation with it as well, or?
No, for me, a probationary period, if you feel at the 6 month point that they're not right, you can extend it. But I would probably suggest if the employer's not quite happy and they're on a fixed term, it's likely that relationship is going to end at the end of that 6 month period, rather than an extension. It wouldn't, I think if somebody doesn't know in those first 6 months, then it's not right. And I think it's best to make a decision at that point than just keep extending it and leaving somebody, I suppose, hanging on and having no certainty.
Yeah, it's an important fact to consider because, you know, obviously the whole point of webinars like this is so we don't end up in a situation where somebody has to get rid of anyone within that first 6 months, because, you know, they've got to be really terrible to be got rid of if they're free.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
you know, that's the whole point of trying to guide on recruitment and inducting and all those sorts of things. But yeah, I guess that probation period just allows them to be able to go through the HR processes at that point if it isn't working.
Yeah, and some people decide not to do that. I think it gives a good backdrop to really assess, and what it also does is, you know, quite often employers will say, while you're in your probationary period, you won't have access to full HR procedures such as disciplinary and grievance, because if it's not right, like you say, especially if somebody's free, that we need to be able to make a quick decision on that as opposed to being tied up in lengthy processes.
Okay, yeah, that's really useful, thank you.
Okay, so on their first day then, again, just a few suggestions on what to do. So absolutely do your introductions, give them a tour around the building. A goodie bag. This is quite often something that a lot of my clients do. So they will make sure that not only have they got everything that they need, so the right setup, there's nothing worse than coming on your first day and not having the equipment that you need. So that's absolutely integral. But having something that makes them just feel a little extra special, a goodie bag, the branded items will just make them feel so much more integral and part of the team. But they make every part of the day accounted for. And again, as the line manager, I would suggest give up your day. That's absolutely for the new recruit. So make sure that they know at every step of the day what they're doing, when they're going for lunch, who they're going with. But what I will say as well is it can be very intense on your first day. So give them some space as well during the day to digest. But just make sure that that's accounted for and factored into, as opposed to them just being left flailing around. Meet the team, buddy and mentor, having somebody looking out for them. I've put down there about learning style. So this is something, again, I use quite a lot with my clients. One suggestion, it's actually on my website if anybody did want to tap into it, is Honey and Mumford. And what that does, it just gives you an indication. They can complete that. They could even do that before they joined. They complete that and you get an understanding of, are they more responsive to reading through the information or being shown how to do it, or watching something more virtual. It just gives you a little bit more of an insight about how they learn best. And even on that first day, I would suggest gather feedback, you know, keep going back to them. What has worked for you today? What would help even more tomorrow? What can we do differently? Or what can we keep doing that's really, really helped? So keep tapping into that person. So the buddy and mentor then. So this is something that you know, again, I would say for a young person, having somebody that they can go to that isn't their line manager will be really, really useful for them. But what I would say is that it needs to be somebody who can answer and positively questions about the company and its culture and processes, almost the unwritten way of things, the rules, but again, in a very friendly manner, as opposed to how it may be perceived from their line manager. There's a bit more of a telling way. So somebody who will take them to lunch, show them around, but it has to be somebody who has time, is accessible, probably if you can, that does a similar role, who's really going to sing the praises of the company and just show them how things work. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time with a few mythbusters, because again, we're talking about young people coming into the workplace, and I've focused on Gen Z, but I do feel that there are similar myths going around about millennials and other generations that are very, very sweeping statements. And I just wanted to almost call people out for those and just cover off a few of those, so that we're not going into recruiting somebody with these viewpoints about people that just may not be true. So there is a myth that they only communicate online, that you know, they're not going to be able to communicate face to face. And there is a lot of online communication, and I'm not saying that that's not going to be an issue, but even if that is the case, in the workplace, face-to-face communication is key. So it has to be seen as a learning opportunity for them, you know, bring them on that journey and help them to build that skill set about face-to-face communication. They're lazy and entitled. I mean, again, what a sweeping statement that is. What I would, you know, hope that individuals have seen over the last 12 months while people have been working remotely is, you know, that the younger generation have witnessed these people working from home and how hard they've had to juggle every different element. So I think, you know, to assume that they are is extremely wrong. They think they know it all. Well, my challenge to that would be, is that the case, or are they just assertive? It's more known that actually Gen Z really, really want to learn. So I think if you're interpreting that they know it all, it's not the case. It's much more the fact that they're really, really keen to learn and develop. They're job switchers. I mean, this has been a myth for lots and lots of different generations. Actually, research has shown that Gen Zers are looking to grow within an organisation and are more likely to look for different roles within an organisation rather than look to a different workplace. So basically, they see the opportunity to grow as important, as extremely important, and won't want to leave if that opportunity is there for them where they are currently working. Youthful optimism, which can be linked to naivety. So Robert Half researchers called Gen Z the reality check generation. This is due to the world that they grew up in, and they are hesitant to take on student debt. They're worried that they won't be able to repay student loans. And because they're so aware, they are highly motivated by salary. But because of this, because they're not willing to take on that student debt, there is an opportunity to really tap into Gen Zers, and certainly on the Kickstart scheme, tap into the educational opportunities there for them, work with them to upskill, and the loyalty that you'll then receive from them will just be immense.
To elaborate on that, Tracy, explain to people that don't know about the educational opportunities within that. So there's a list of mandatory training courses that the DWP want us to deliver. So we're delivering all of those, and that's about 2 to 3 hours a week for the learners. Then there's a list of voluntary courses that I mean, you know, Jenny, she's very detailed and thorough and all those sort of things. So she's got a billion courses that they could go through related to you know, some basic skills or related to their specific job. So there's loads and loads of things like that. And also we're putting on webinars like this for the employees, which are hugely beneficial. You know, employees don't typically get access to someone of your expertise or someone at that level. So it's great for them at that early stage of their career. It's normally directors and senior managers that tap into someone of your level or something. So there's 3 layers of that stuff. So there's as much learning as they want to do there, you know, starting with the 2 to 3 hours, but if they wanted to do more in their own time, there's loads and loads of courses on there, from the very basic stuff up to teaching themselves coding.
Yeah,
Stuff
and
like
just
that.
tap into that, because these individuals, you know, again, we're always going to have some that don't fit into that mold, but as a generalist, these individuals will really want to tap into that themselves and utilize this to best effect. Okay, so just adapting your induction and onboarding process for young people. So research has shown that young people often left in the first week, as I've said, if they don't feel that they're comfortable with those workplace basics. We've talked about the importance to Gen Z of learning. So give them that, impart that knowledge with them about the company's history, the aims, and explain how their role fits into it. They really want to understand what part of the cog they play in the big work machine. It's important that they understand what they're doing and brought into why they're there. So create an opportunity for an early win. When you're assigning work tasks to them, allocate something that could lead to quite a quick early success, which will help them build their confidence within their role. Policies and procedures, explain in full. We've talked about the probationary period, but just include your information to help them understand why they are in there. And again, thinking about, they may not have had to have come across policies like this before. They need to know from the basic level why they're there and how they apply. Clearly lay out holiday procedures, sickness, what to do if they're late. Health and safety is absolutely key, but set boundaries around the phone use and social media. Don't assume that they know any of this. And the nurturing element, show them, don't just give them, so make that time. And we've talked about having the access to the learning styles questionnaire, so you know how it works for them. Nurture that young person, make time to ensure they know that the systems and the equipment, and continually reinforce what they're doing well. But don't be afraid to raise with them where things could be improved. Teach them to communicate. Many young workers just won't have those skills, and that is not because they are never going to be able to communicate. It's because of the virtual world that we're living in, and because of a lack of practice. They just won't have been in the workplace as long as me, for example. So they've had less face-to-face time to develop those relationships. So help them articulate their ideas, help them to slow down and not rush through their interactions, and know when to remain quiet and soak up that information and feedback their suggestions. But just as a final point on there is just don't adopt a one-size-fits-all approach to onboarding, you know, for anybody, because everybody is so unique and different that what works for one won't necessarily work for another. So just in summary then, just make it happen from the get-go. Make sure it's high on your agenda from the point that you're interviewing somebody and getting close to offering that position. Put yourself in their shoes, think back to how you would have felt. Don't assume anything about them, about how they learn or how they're going to take feedback. Work with them on an individual basis. And taking the time to get it right is absolutely crucial. Do not underestimate the amount of time you will need to get them up to speed. But just think about the bigger picture with this, that once you've spent that time, you know, the response to that and the loyalty that you will get will pay back tenfold. and check in regularly, get feedback, find out how things are going with them, find out what development they still need. Just keep checking in with them. So yeah, that's everything. Happy to answer questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. But yeah, absolutely happy to answer any questions.
So Tracy, first of all, I'd just like to say thanks for all that. It's really useful information. I've shared in the chat that resource on your website you talked about, the Honey and Mumford
Yeah, fabulous.
styles. I've shared that, and hopefully people can utilize that. And it was really, really useful, because obviously what we're trying to do here is prevention. We're trying to do this before they have to fix things, or someone walks out after a week or two because they've been thrown in at the deep end. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear people's questions, because I think a lot of the reasons that people are scared of employing young people because of all the misconceptions and all the worries and all the stuff around that. So it'd be interesting to hear all their concerns or questions or whatever. So if you want to unmute yourselves and ask a question, it'd be really nice to hear from you all.
I've scared everybody into submission.
They're all scared to talk, or they're not listening. One of the two.
Hi, it's Ellen here. Do you want questions specifically about the presentation, or more broadly about the process for Kickstart?
Both. Whatever you feel needs covering.
Yeah, because I'm interested in other people. So we've had lots of, particularly this week, which has been fascinating, a lot of referrals. So you get that email ping through going, you've had a referral, and I got really excited, and then I realised it doesn't mean they're actually applying yet. Does anybody know any kind of conversion type rate of, which I suppose is probably an impossible question, but how specific have they been matched to the jobs that they've been suggested for?
Yeah, so sorry, it's Ellen, isn't it?
Yes.
So the first thing, we generally advise at least 20 referrals, because there's probably a bit more filtering than normal for this thing. So usually a minimum of 20 kind of CVs before you find the right person. It might be the first CV you find, it might be the last one. We don't really know. Also, what we'd say is if you don't find the right person in that bunch, then don't worry, you don't have to take the best of a bad bunch. That isn't the process.
I mean, we haven't had any applications yet. It was more that we'll get the email telling us that, so I didn't know how, what their background is.
The second part of that is, as you found out, that is just someone, they've been told that they should apply for your job. And what you're reliant on there is the work coach in the job centre. And there will be some fantastic work coaches that are really filtering and really, really do care about both the employer and the employee. But at the other end of the spectrum, there might be some really, really busy work coaches that have got, thousands and thousands of CVs on their desk and don't have the time or whatever to do that. So I don't know if you caught the webinar with Ian Ratcliffe, but that's on the YouTube channel. It's really, really worth tapping into, because you are allowed to advertise these roles as well. You don't just have to rely on the job centre.
Yeah.
So on our YouTube channel, there's a webinar done by Ian, who talks about writing a good, he's from a job site. So he talks about how to use the job site and write a really good advert. And then what that does is that effectively widens your net. They still need to be qualified for the scheme, and most job sites will have filter questions where, so you advertise it as a Kickstart role, and then you have filter questions that say, look, are you 18 to 24? Are you on universal credit? Are you eligible for the Kickstart scheme, so that you don't get any CVs through. So then what that does is that means that you're getting the more proactive people that really, really want to work, not the people that have just been forced to apply for your job to keep the benefits. So that YouTube video would be really beneficial.
Thank you.
So yeah, and Tracy, did you want to add anything onto Ellen's questions there?
No, I think you've answered. Your knowledge of the Kickstarter scheme is much better than my mark. So yeah, I think that I've nothing further to add. Just good luck with it, Ellen.
Oh, well, I got really excited the first email, and then I was like, oh, right, okay, it's not on. So we've had lots, and to say it's fascinating. Last week, there was only a couple, but it was yesterday or the day before, I got about 5 in a row. So it was just understanding, my dad used to work for the DWP years ago, and so I've got a bit of an understanding of it might not be anything they're interested in, and it's eventually how they get matched to something they actually want to apply for, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm just going to put that in the chat for you now. I'll put that video in the chat for you, so you can watch it and so on and so forth. And that's the whole reason why we're doing all these videos, is so that people can get most of the processes right. And because this scheme is when this scheme is run right, it's a brilliant scheme. It's a young person who's bright, enthusiastic, hardworking, wants to prove themselves, matched with an employer that puts all their induction processes in place, does everything right, and that should lead to a good experience. The flip side is also true, that people don't care about their people, are just prepared to accept the first CV that comes through, then they might not have a great experience of it, which is why we're guiding on this. And a lot of that guidance comes from my experience of being an employer on similar schemes and working with lots of education and training schemes like this, that there is a bit more filtering than you would in a normal job thing. So is any more questions? People want to mute themselves or put it in the chat or whatever, feel free, don't be scared. Maybe nobody's listening, don't know. Okay, is there anything you want to add then, if no one wants any more questions?
No, I just want to say thank you everybody for listening. It is something that if you get it right, that it will be really, really beneficial. So I hope it's been useful. And like in the chat, happy to share the slides with you all. More than happy for you to take that away.
Oh, there's a question here. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Courtney says, you mentioned getting together with a couple. Would be something an employer considered as paid training?
I probably wouldn't, to be fair, at that initial stage, and it's a good sign of how really bought in somebody is. I think as long as you aren't expecting that they do something at a particular time, then I think it just needs to be ad hoc and fluid and flexible.
Yeah, and there's a point here by Carla. It's not really a question, but thanks for putting your point in the chat, Carla. She says, really informative, especially because it's just myself and my sister running the company. We only have self-employed adult teachers at the present, so quite new to actually employing anyone. I mean, we discussed that kind of before we kind of started broadcasting, didn't we, Tracy? That it's really common in the sectors that I work with, that there's a lot of self-employed people. So taking on the first few employees is a daunting process, or if you're not used to it. So that's why we're putting all this stuff together, and why we're trying to help you feel less daunted by that process. So thanks for your point there, Carla, and hopefully that this has helped. Some more questions here. Yeah, Courtney's just very much saying, so this is super. Ellen Wood has said, is there a network for us as employers? You mean, Ellen, do you mean as
So I was writing another bit. I'm just thinking now out loud that I don't know, is there any benefit to having some way of us all chatting together? I've had this challenge, I've had that, more broadly, not specifically, but for example, the smaller employers, that it might just help with confidence or interviews. That myself and our office manager have had a long chat about interview process for the person and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It was just a thought.
If there was something that it was beneficial to all the employers that we're working with, we could put together a closed Facebook group or something. But in lieu of that, I'd just speak to Jenny, who Tracy knows Jenny, and she's really, really very competent, very detailed, and can answer most of your questions. And if we can't answer anything, we can then speak to DWP, because there might be something they can specifically answer. They don't respond quickly typically, or depends who you speak to, but yeah, if that's something we might look to put together, if that was really beneficial to people.
Yeah, and equally, I don't know if everybody's got access to my, email. Certainly send. I'm more than happy if anybody has any questions, just to send me an email, and I'll do my best to help out.
Okay, yeah, and also we'll Tracy, they've asked if they could get the slides, so if we could get the slides and send those around, then I'll have your contact details on there. I'll have that chart that you mentioned at the time, which would be really useful for people, just making sure they do everything that they should be doing to onboard and induct these people as best as possible.
Yeah, more than happy to do that.
Okay. Any other questions for anyone while we're here? You know, you've got Tracy here as an expert. You may as well use her. You won't be able to ask her questions if you're watching it later on YouTube. And yeah, for anyone that missed it, I've put in the chat the link to the YouTube video and putting together a really good job advert and how to do that related to the Kickstart scheme as well. So, and there's other videos on the YouTube channel, and Tracy's will go up there as well afterwards. Yeah, so any other questions, just feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll thank Tracy for her time and her expertise, and yeah, I've certainly found, I've been employing people for years, but it's obviously it's certainly informative to me, and those people who are new to employing or less experienced in it, I think it'd be even more beneficial to them. So thanks a lot, Tracy. Really appreciate it.
No, that's fine. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Yeah, and as Tracy said, if anyone wants to get in touch with her contact details be in the slides, which we'll email out to everyone. And obviously you could watch the video later on YouTube if there's anything you missed. You have to go to the door and answer the postman or whatever. But thanks for listening, everyone. We'll let you get back on with your lunch and everything. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.